Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today we are dancing, but we're also
It's just
talking about handhelds.
Episode of dancing.
A whole episode of dance.
Yeah. So this is kind of a part two on a deeper dive of just like the chronology of handhelds and like how they have affected us as people and like the games about. I'm just like, it's like a more broader thing rather than picking some like specific things to dive into like we usually do. I'm trying to do like a more overarching thing here. So
I like it. I think it's a good experiment to see if this works going forward.
Trying something new. It's been kind of fun, and I'm like having a few episodes sort of like outlined and planned in advance has been kind of neat, even if sometimes I end up destroying the plans in the middle of writing the script for one of them. But it's making me think a lot about this stuff, which is very cool too. So last time we talked about handhelds, we talked specifically about the Game Boy and how that little brick that could physically withstand a bomb being dropped on it also won its market without any kind of real competition. Gunpei Yokoi he coined this term. This is like a refresher. He coined this term, lateral thinking with withered technology, and he made a cheap, low-spec game machine. And how did this thing win its market like that? On paper, it's worse than any of its competition by miles, right? And I will tell you how, Mike. To borrow another phrase from the 90s and apply it to this episode, slightly modified, it's the games, stupid. Sorry, Mike, I'm not calling you stupid with that.
No, but you're referencing the Ragin' Cajun James Carville's It's the Economy, Stupid, if I recall.
That is right. That's correct. And that's very 90s, which is sort of the time period we're living in today. Okay, picture it. Kyoto. 1991. The workday is over and everyone has gone home. There's a programmer here named Kazuaki Morita, and he's still at his desk. He's working with the only Game Boy development kit in the whole building at Nintendo. He's got a passion project brewing. He's got this idea. Well, could you put something like Zelda on the Game Boy? He had to know, and he was putting in the extra time after work to find out. And other people are noticing and joining in on the fun here. So Takeshi Tezuka, his boss, said, we do our regular work during normal hours and then work on it sort of like an after-school club activity. They were kind of messing around with the development kit, sort of seeing what it was capable of. It was capable of a lot, and what they were working on would eventually go on to become The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, which is a game that I know is near and dear to your heart, Mike. Did you know that started out that way?
No, I didn't know it started out as an after-work project.
Yeah, they started out just like, I guess, like fun thing to do after work, and then once it caught on, they originally thought about trying to port A Link to the Past. They were like, oh, this is actually doable. Let's port A Link to the Past. But eventually they just decided they would do like a whole new game. We will come. Yeah, me too. We will come back to this later on in this podcast. But I think it's kind of fun to think about like just one guy sort of tinkering with something and then like other people joining in and being like, oh, this is really fun, and working with the limitations of this device.
That's how great projects start.
Yeah. So some of these games that we're going to talk about today, we've talked about before in the past, but I want to talk about the most important games for the Game Boy's success and how the constraints of the platform actually ended up producing some of the best games. Some of them in spite of technical shortcomings. Some of them were successful because of the technical shortcomings and the workarounds that were used to overcome them. And then there were other kinds of limitations that these groups ran into as well that weren't just technological. So this is sort of a conversation about limitations and how they can be good for creativity. So the Game Boy would go on to get over 1,000 games made for it. That contrasts with the Game Gear, which had only 365 games made for it, and the Atari Lynx had just 71 games made for it. Now, I'm not saying here that quantity beats quality. And a lot of those games were licensed garbage. We all know that. It's not 1,000 quality games on the Game Boy, right? But more shots on goal also means more opportunities for goals. And in that way, quantity is a quality all its own. So I've got 4 games I want to run through. And here's what kind of got me when I was putting this list together. Every one of these games was made under some kind of limitation, but only one of them is actually the kind that you would find on a spec sheet. So one team had to make a Mario game without anyone who had ever worked on a Mario game before. One company was doing the math on whether or not it was even worth putting stuff on the Game Boy here. One game literally just did not have enough colors, and that is how they made some of the innovations that they did. And then one team didn't have anybody paying attention to them at all, and that's how they kind of got away with making some whimsy here. So this is kind of like 4 different flavors of not enough, and every one of them made the game better than it would have been otherwise. And the last one is my favorite, and we'll get there. We already talked about it. It's Link's Awakening, spoilers.
I like that, though. I like this idea.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to play around with the limitations here. So the first game here I want to talk about is the weirdest Mario game, at least at the time. There may be weirder Mario games than this now, but at least at the time, this was definitely the weirdest one, I think, even in contrast with Super Mario Brothers 2. So on the day it launched, the Game Boy had just like 4 or 5 games available to it. Honestly, not too bad for a Nintendo console. Also, I say 4 or 5 because it's back in these days kind of hard to pin down exactly what day a game came out and what day a console came out.
Mhm.
So it's like, yeah, they were like roughly 4 or 5 games, maybe depending on the store you went to, that kind of thing.
I ran into that with Diablo 1. I was like 1996 or 1997. It's like right at the end of the year. So I was like, what one is it? And then I'm getting different conflicting things. So it's
Yeah,
kind of like, what do I do in this situation?
it's like they just sent the game off to manufacturing one day and we're just like, I guess when it gets to stores is when it came out. And some stores get them at different times than others. So it's hard to like pin down an actual launch date. And you can't say the day we sent it off to press the game is the launch date because nobody can play it on that day. So you just like, I don't know, I guess launch day is when you can get it. So the strongest title at the Game Boy's launch, besides the pack-in game Tetris, at least in North America, because it was not the pack-in game in Japan, was Super Mario Land. And I think that we can all agree on that. There's like a tennis game, there's a baseball game, but it's Super Mario Land. That's the game the gamers are buying. Tetris is the game everybody else is buying. Tetris is the game everybody buys. Super Mario Land is the game gamers are buying, if that makes sense, right? So we talked about this before in our episode about handheld companion games, Super Mario Land specifically, but I want to bring it up here because I think it's one of the most important games on the Game Boy. Sometimes a Nintendo platform doesn't get a real Mario game on launch. The GameCube didn't get its Mario title for a year. Neither did the Wii or the Wii U or the Switch. Now that it's been a really long time since a Nintendo console platform has had a Mario game on launch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
The DS had Super Mario 64 DS, if you count that, because it's kind of a remake, right?
It's a remake in my mind. It's not a standalone Mario game.
Yeah. So like I would say that it wasn't until like 2006 when new Super Mario Brothers comes out for the DS that like really the DS got its Mario game. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, at the time, Nintendo platform launching without a Mario game was like kind of weird. So anyway, the Game Boy's hardware constraints meant that the team couldn't just port Super Mario Brothers over to it. The game was very large and it would not get a proper handheld version until Super Mario Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. And even that one had some compromises made to it. So because Super Mario Land was being worked on by a totally different team, it was a totally different game from Super Mario Brothers on the NES. It didn't take place in the Mushroom Kingdom. It didn't have Bowser or Princess Peach. There were a lot of gameplay differences in the enemies and things like that. Plus 2 shoot 'em up levels, the 6th level and the 12th level, respectively. There's like a submarine one, and Mario's flying in a plane on the final level. It's super weird. Maybe not as weird as Super Mario Brothers 2 on the NES, but definitely pretty weird from like a gameplay perspective, at least. And reviewers kind of saw the game as its own thing and not just like a Game Boy version of the NES game. It was originally going to be the Game Boy's pack-in game for obvious reasons, but we talked about last episode how Hank Rogers suggested that Tetris be the pack-in game because it appealed to a much wider audience. And I think he was right. Because like I said, gamers were going to buy Super Mario Land anyway. Everybody else wanted Tetris. And I think by including Tetris in the pack, you captured both audiences pretty easily there. So at launch, this was just another game on the shelf. It does get packed in later. Super Mario Land will get packed in later with the Game Boy and different bundles and stuff like that. But at launch, it's just another game on the shelf. It's actually the 4th best-selling Game Boy game at roughly 18 million units.
That's a lot of units.
Which I think is right behind Tetris is like maybe number 1. But then like Pokemon, the 2 Pokemon generations outsell Super Mario Land. And they are unsurprisingly some of the highest selling games on the platform. So I want to do a little small aside here to talk about Nintendo's R&D structure, because one interesting thing to call out here is that Miyamoto had little to no involvement with many of the Game Boy's most successful games, which is kind of fun for me to think about. Many of them were based on characters that he had created, but most of these games were made by Nintendo's R&D 1 group, which was headed by Gunpei Yokoi. And this group was dedicated to handhelds. They had done the Game & Watch stuff, and then when the Game Boy came out, they were tasked with making games for the Game Boy. Miyamoto worked on R&D 4, which would eventually become Nintendo EAD, and that was the group that was dedicated to making games for home consoles. So he was off working on his own stuff for the NES and the Super Nintendo by this point. R&D 2 and 3 also did exist. One of them was dedicated to developing home console hardware, and the other one did some software stuff before eventually becoming the home console hardware group. I think their purposes were a little bit muddied at the time. That's probably why eventually they sort of like reorganized things. But it felt weird to talk about R&D 1 and 4 without talking about 2 and 3. So I thought I'd just bring
like
that up
skips those two. It's weird.
Yeah. So I think it's great that Nintendo was able to make a hit themselves here. And all of these, all the people that were working on this game had never made a Mario game before, and so they were kind of starting from scratch, but like sort of reconstructing the feel of a Mario game, which is why it kind of feels different from other Mario games, including like the technical limitations and all that stuff. It's just like a cool game that like really accurately captures the Super Mario Brothers feeling without really captures the Super Mario Brothers feeling without being the same exact game just ported over to the Game Boy. And it's cool that another team without the resources of the original people that had made Super Mario Brothers, they were able to make their own thing that was really cool. And that's like a cool kind of technical limitation, but like a limitation to work around. They also had all the technical limitations they needed to work around. Mario is very small. They couldn't do like color changes to show that he had different power-ups. And a lot of the enemies like work a little bit differently, which I think is
the game's also super short.
Yeah.
It's a super short game.
Yeah. You can beat it in like 15, 20 minutes if you know what you're doing. But it takes you a while to get to the point where you know what you're doing. So it's definitely Nintendo hard of just like you keep playing levels over and over and over until you have them perfected. And then your reward for perfecting the level is you move on to the next one until you have played all 12 of them.
Yeah,
which is really fun. So like I said, it's great that Nintendo was able to make a hit themselves here, but everyone knows that even the strongest first-party lineup needs third-party developers to supplement. And did any show up for the Game Boy? Heck yeah, they did. Game number 2. This one doesn't come up as much, I feel like, in conversations about Game Boy games, but I think it is important demonstration of like what the platform is capable of in spite of technical limitations and also maybe some money limitations here. So Mario Land and Tetris showed us that the Game Boy could have good, simple games. But some gamers crave something deeper, something with more math, something like a full-blown RPG. And who was making the best RPGs at the time? I'm talking about Squaresoft. Enix fanboys will say that Dragon Quest is better than Final Fantasy, but they're wrong. Dragon Quest is not better than Final Fantasy.
Shots fired.
Yeah, my brother's going to come at me in the comments here. But could a full-blown JRPG be done on the Game Boy? No one knew, and Square was going to be the first to find out. An RPG is a big undertaking, right? You spend dozens of hours in front of your TV grinding it out on random encounters to get strong enough for whatever challenge you're facing. Putting a game that big on a platform that small is either a great idea or a terrible idea. It turns out it was actually a great idea. So This game is called The Final Fantasy Legend, and it started life in Japan as a game called Makaitoshi Saga. It's actually the first game in the Saga series, which is a series that never really caught on in the US beyond the Final Fantasy Legend series on Game Boy. I think maybe if they hadn't tried to tie it in with Final Fantasy, they could have given a new series a start, or maybe it just would have gone nowhere and it would have been dead on arrival. And Final Fantasy is the only thing that made people give it a chance. We may never know. Yeah, it was purely marketing. By the way, that Final Fantasy stuff is like straight up just purely marketing. And I think even the PR people at Square agree with that. This game has nothing to do with Final Fantasy beyond being turn-based and having random encounters and being made by Square. And I would say that at the time too, because this is in a time before Final Fantasy IV. So Final Fantasy games were all very different. The first 3, I mean, they all are very different from each other. So like just calling this another Final Fantasy game and then being super different from the ones that came before, not that weird for a Final Fantasy game in that day and age, or any day and age really. So, but it also is still lacking a lot of the things that sort of tie a lot of these games together. So it is its own series, and it goes on to become its own series. So it's worth saying that it was like just kind of called Final Fantasy just for the marketing factor, but it did well. It sold over 1 million copies, and it proved that the big console RPG experience could be shrunk down to fit in your pocket. I think it's funny because handhelds are actually one of my favorite ways to play turn-based JRPGs. But in the Game Boy times, that wasn't a given. Like, again, this was the first one, right? It's the first Square game also to sell 1 million copies. So it did the best of any Square game at the time. I think that's pretty cool. So it was a pretty huge hit by their standards at the time, and it explains why they went on to make 2 more of them on Game Boy, Final Fantasy Legend 2 and Final Fantasy Legend 3. Plus, they also made a game called Final Fantasy Adventure, or Mystic Quest, as our European friends know it, which is the first game in the Mana series. And it's more of a real-time, like more of a Zelda-like action RPG. But I think it's kind of funny how Square was just sort of throwing Final Fantasy on everything in the 90s, and then like, oh, it worked? Well, it's not Final Fantasy anymore. It's something else. Which is,
it's totally different.
Yeah, maybe another story for another time. But this game is important because I think it shows how companies were willing to take risks on the Game Boy that they might not have taken otherwise. This is mostly speculation on my part. I couldn't find any sources to like back up how Square viewed the Game Boy, if they viewed it as a big risk or not. But we do know that Square has said in the past that the green lighting of new games is based on sales of old games, and that's how this was. It was back then too. So they're definitely calculating risk like this when it comes time to decide what games to make. And so it was a bigger risk to put something on the Game Boy. And then after that, when it sold really well, they were like, of course, we're going to make 2 and 3. That was then seen as less of a risk for them. So I think being an easy device to develop for, even if it's not the most powerful, meant these kinds of oddball swings could be taken. And then, some of them would be hits. Plus, being a cheaper device meant that it was in the pockets of more people. So combination of being like easy to develop for, plus a larger potential audience for your game means that making games is less risky, and developers and publishers love platforms that feel less risky. I think we can all kind of agree on that. So now I want to move back to some high-powered Nintendo franchises.
Before you do that,
yeah,
do you have a favorite JRPG you've played on handheld? That you're like, this is because technically Pokemon's a JRPG.
Yeah. My favorite to play on handheld or favorite handheld RPG, like, because I've played a lot of Final Fantasies on handheld that were not necessarily did not come out.
Ones that is meant for a handheld, that was like, I would say something that came out on like Game Boy,
yeah,
Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, all that stuff. I liked Fire. Would you consider Fire Emblem?
Yeah, it's a tactical RPG, sure.
Yeah, Fire Emblem Awakening was great when I played that on my 2DS. I really liked that game a lot.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to think of like handheld specific. I love playing JRPGs on handhelds, but I can't think of any like really specifically handheld JRPGs that weren't like otherwise just ports from either emulation or like ports from previous full console games. Dang, that's one that I would have to come back to. Maybe I
didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just thinking about it because I haven't played like any real Final Fantasies on handheld or Dragon Warrior stuff, So like, I just it's another area of my gaming repertoire that is missing. I guess.
Oh, I can't answer this question. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that game's awesome.
Is it on the Switch?
They remade it for 3DS, but it was originally a Game Boy Advance game.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that game is awesome. I also love the Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle series. That's kind of cheating because it's a Switch game, so it's like handheld and console. But
we've talked about that a lot, though. Man. We love those games.
Yeah, I love those games. Those games taught me that I actually do like tactical RPGs.
Fire Emblem in your future? Maybe.
I've played a little bit of Fire Emblem, and I wasn't able to really get into it, but it did go back to Final Fantasy Tactics, and I played through the Ivalice Chronicles, the recent remake of Final Fantasy Tactics, and I loved it. Had a great time.
Nice.
Yeah. So the next game I want to talk about here is another high-powered Nintendo franchise, and that is Metroid 2. And we don't have to spend a ton of time on this again. We've done a whole episode on Metroid 2, so you can go back and listen to that. That was 5.5 years ago, Mike. So it feels like not that long ago, and also 5.5 years ago feels like a long time ago now.
Let's not say that anymore. Let's just not say how long ago we did certain things. If it's past a year, let's just refrain from mentioning it. We can just say in the before times or something.
In the before times. Metroid 2 is a really, really great case study here because the hardware limitations directly affected the rest of the series after this game. Like everything that comes after Metroid 2 is heavily affected by Metroid 2 and what it did to get around certain hardware limitations. And the biggest thing that I'm going to refer to here is the Varia suit. So the Varia suit in the NES original game Metroid is obtainable by Samus on Brinstar a little ways into the game. It's like halfway through, I want to say. It protects Samus from high temperatures, and it is indicated by a color change on Samus's character sprite from the orange to like kind of a light pink color. Well, when they made Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, they obviously couldn't just do a slight color change on Samus to indicate when she got the Varia suit because it would just be a slightly different shade of gray and it would not be obvious, right? So they had to do something else, something that would be much more obvious. And so what did they do? They added big, huge like balls to her shoulders to show that she'd had her armor upgraded. So in this game, Samus's sprite was also bigger on the screen on the Game Boy than it was on the NES, both in terms of like total pixels, but also in like screen real estate as well. She's just larger. Everything in that game is just larger than they are on the NES, so that they could pack some more detail into those sprites at the cost of being able to show less stuff on screen at once, which I think worked out in that game's favor. It's designed around it, so it's not a big deal. Yeah, so that's huge, because from then on, the Varia suit is always how Samus is depicted by default. Like if you look on the covers of all of the Metroid games, they all have her with some form of the Varia suit, even though she almost never has it from the beginning. Maybe actually never has it from the beginning. I can't fact check that in real time, but I think she never has the Varia suit from the beginning, but she's always got the Varia suit on the cover of the box. Even if there are further upgrades available to her, like the cover of Metroid Prime, she's in the Varia suit. There's a gravity suit and a Phazon suit in that game too, but that's how she's always depicted. So I think it's become this iconic thing for her. And so the Game Boy's hardware deficiencies actually ended up creating the most iconic look for one of Nintendo's most iconic characters. It didn't hurt that Metroid. Cool. Yeah. It's like that's because the Game Boy was black and white, that Samus has those giant shoulder pads. Yeah, even now, 30 years later, which is, yeah, I think it's awesome. It also didn't hurt that Metroid 2 is just a great game, especially when you hold it up next to its older sister on the NES. This is Gunpei Yokoi, lateral thinking with withered technology, right? How can we use our platform's limitations to our advantage? If the Game Boy had had a color screen, Samus's shoulders would look different in every single Metroid game going forward, and that's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The other thing that Metroid 2 brought forward to the future Metroids is the ending. So Yoshio Sakamoto, who is the director for Super Metroid, was directly inspired by the ending of Metroid 2 when making Super Metroid. There's spoilers here, but I'm talking about when Samus saves the baby Metroid at the end of Metroid 2. Spoilers for a 30-year-old game.
People can still get mad, apparently. Found that out on Instagram too.
Yep. This is a story beat that wasn't really affected by the hardware, but it does show how a smaller handheld game can have profound effects on the games that come later, and I think that's pretty cool. I should note here that Sakamoto didn't work on Metroid 2 at all. He was just inspired by the ending, so when he came time to make Super Metroid, he was like, wow, that was a really cool ending. Let's do that. So he's quoted as saying, if Metroid 2 Return of Samus had never been created, what followed would most likely have taken a different path. And maybe, more importantly, I wouldn't be standing here today. Food for thought. So kind of makes you wonder what other hardware limitations led to things that we just take for granted these days, right?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. Have you played Metroid 2?
No, I have not. I'm pretty bad about Metroid. It's like I never really played them. Like when I was a kid, I remember playing them and being like, this is so hard, and like kind of giving up, and not really going for it or trying to solve it.
Yeah. They don't give you the most direction in games too.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, right? Is you explore, you figure it out. That's the fun. And then when you do figure it out, you feel really cool.
Yeah.
So I need to play those old Metroids.
You should. Metroid 2 has a really good 3DS remake.
Ooh.
So I recommend that version of it. Although you could play the original. There are lots of fan remakes of it too. I think the most popular one is called Another Metroid 2 Remake, which kind of just makes it, I think that they changed the sprites around. It looks more like Super Metroid. It's like Metroid 2, but with Super Metroid graphics, which is pretty neat.
Nice. I need to break out my 2DS more and play it more. So maybe I should get some more games on it. So that might be a good one to grab.
Yeah, they're really easy to mod too and play backups of your legally owned games on.
Of course, always legally owned games.
Yeah, always legally owned copies the backups you've made yourself.
Mm-hmm. Make your own backups here.
That's right. So now I want to move back to the guy with the only dev kit and his little after school club. And that's Game 4, The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. So the once it got the attention of Tezuka, which was Morita's boss, it became an officially sanctioned project, and the team was able to double the amount of Game Boy dev kits that they had, which meant that they now had 2 dev kits.
It's wild.
Yeah, dang, really going all out here.
2 dev kits.
2 dev kits.
This is crazy.
This team was operating very sparsely, which is a form of limitation in itself. So they recruited a person named Yoshiaki Koizumi from another division, which was apparently a pretty crazy thing to do at Nintendo back in those days. According to Iwata in an interview, he's like, wow, that's unheard of. We would never do that today. Again, this whole team has nothing to do with the original Zelda or Zelda 2 games on the NES. This is kind of like the team that made Super Mario Land. They're just like trying to make a Mario game with nobody who's made Mario games. Now they're trying to make a Zelda game with nobody who's made a Zelda game before. Miyamoto is credited as a producer on this game, but it should be noted that he largely left this project alone. He really gave them nothing. He was probably too busy working on Star Fox at this point by the time 1993 rolled around. He was much more focused on console games and Super Nintendo. So they took the kind of the same approach with this game as Mario Land did. They removed a lot of traditionally Zelda things. No Triforce, no Hyrule, not even the titular princess is in this game.
Wow.
Yeah. I also love that this game is full of like references to other Nintendo games. So there's lots of Mario stuff in here. Chain Chomps and Goombas. Kirby is in this game. There's an installment of Iwata Asks where they get asked about Kirby directly. And Tezuka says, he's like, I think Hal approved this, but he admits that there's some people over there may have never heard of them approving this, which is really funny because Iwata is sitting right there in the room with him, and he was running HAL Labs at the time. And so he's the guy who would have had to approve this. And he just kind of lets Tezuka off the hook. He's like, I don't know if anybody would have recognized Kirby back then. I wasn't honored to be in a Zelda game. Yeah. Like he doesn't say that they approved it, but he's also like that mad about it, you know?
Yeah, that's like one of the fun parts about that game is, and also why it's kind of like dreamy in a way, you know,
Yeah.
as you get the other Nintendo characters showing up in it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's that Yoshi doll in there too, which I think is part of a trading quest. Correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Is this the first Zelda game with a trading quest? I guess there's only 2 games before. Well,
We talked about this, that because Link's Awakening came before Ocarina of Time. So yes, this is the first instance of a trading quest in a Zelda game, I believe. But it's not the first instance of like a trading quest
in a game.
in general, I think. Yeah, because we found out that's like a older like folk tale kind of thing.
Yeah.
The idea of like trading up. So
Yeah.
that's in an email we haven't read on the podcast yet. But hey, you know, that's fine.
All right. Well, maybe we should do that.
Mhm.
I think what's cool about this is they get away with a lot of things like flying under the radar just because they'd been left alone to their own devices. This is like a different kind of limitation other than technical, right? They didn't have a lot of resources from Nintendo to work on this, but the game proved that the limitations weren't as limiting as they previously thought. They got away with all of this because nobody was watching them. And that's a limitation that you don't find on a spec sheet, right? If the Game Boy had been powerful enough to just run Zelda, they probably would have handed it to a real team with a real mandate, and we would have just gotten a straight port of the first game, which would have been pretty sick, and people would have been stoked about that probably. I think that's less interesting than a full game made just for the Game Boy, because instead we got this ragtag group of after-school club nerds making something that would have never been approved if it had just been pitched straight up, right? And this is a full Zelda game. It's a little bit shorter, but it is like a full Zelda game, and it's not just like a Zelda mini game, right? It's super worth playing if you haven't played it. The Switch remake is fantastic. I love the art style in that. It's all like plastic figures and stuff.
It's so fun. I love it.
Yeah. So those
This
are
makes
like,
me want to replay it.
yeah, and it's not very long too, so it's like an easy game to replay too, which is something that I appreciate about games, especially handheld games like this. A lot of them are not very long. So yeah. Those are, I think, some of the most important games to the Game Boy, in my opinion. Tetris should probably also be on this list. I don't think there's much to say about it beyond that it was the packing game and it was a fun, simple yet hard puzzle game that everybody loved. Probably a better thing to watch if you're interested in Tetris is the movie that came out on, I think it's on Apple TV Plus or something. I think I've heard that it is surprisingly accurate, even if it is a little bit embellished, but it's a fun movie to watch. But the game itself is like, it's just a puzzle game. I don't think there's that much interesting about it that makes it such a good fit for the Game Boy, other than just being like a good bite-sized puzzle game to play, and being the pack-in game is very important.
Yeah.
So yeah. What I'm getting at here is that like it's the game, stupid, right? I can remember. I remember getting into like heated debates in middle school and high school about like which console is best because of bits or gigaflops or texture memory bandwidth and stuff like that. And like, even though the Game Boy was the weakest handheld of anything that could have been considered to be competing with it, it's a shining example of how the only thing that matters when it comes to a platform success is the games that are on it. You heard me play it. You've heard me say it over and over. We don't play specs. We play games, right? Hardware makers should try to make good hardware that's easy to develop for and has lots of potential. And I'd say good is a term that doesn't mean technically highest specs. It means easy to develop for. It means cheap enough that people want to buy it, right? That kind of thing. Like, there's more to it that makes a platform good than just specs. And ultimately, it comes down to the creative folks on the game teams to just make good games, right? And the games we talked about today are great because of the limitations that the Game Boy provided and not in spite of those limitations, I would say. At the end of the day, it's all about the games, and the console with the best games wins.
True.
Yep. So I think the Game Boy proves that definitively. You might be asking yourself, Mike, Tyler, you're missing a really important game here, or series of games, or duology of games that really, really were very important to the Game Boy. And that, of course, are the Pokemon games. What are you pointing at? Oh, Magikarp Pro Shop. Yeah, he's wearing a Pokemon hat. If you're not watching the video, he's wearing a Pokemon hat. So I left Pokemon out of this discussion entirely. It is, I will agree with you, it is probably the most important game in handheld gaming history if we take it all together. So I'm not downplaying the importance of it, but it isn't the reason that the original Game Boy won its generation of handheld competition, because Pokemon didn't release in Japan until 1996, and it didn't even come out until 1998 in the US. By then, the corpses of the Turbo Express, Game Gear, and Lynx were already 6 feet under the ground, and it wasn't Pikachu that dug those graves. He merely stomped on them as the Game Boy had already won.
Angry Pikachu stomping on the grave of other handhelds.
Yeah. I think Pokemon can be credited potentially with resurrecting the platform before it had fully wound down, though. It definitely breathed new life into an aging handheld. And it did one other thing, which is that it handed Nintendo a moat, because from here on out, Nintendo owns something that only exists on their handhelds and that people will pick a whole platform just to get. So whether that moat actually held is a question for another day. But I'll tell you right now that a lot of very well-funded people spent the next 20 years trying to cross this moat.
True.
So if Pokemon just arrived at the graveyard at the end of that generation of handhelds, what did it find? What corpses litter the handheld battlefield? How many other metaphors can I mix into this before it stops making sense? That's what we'll talk about on the next installment of this series. I want to dive into some of these less successful handhelds, and let's talk about why they were less successful and maybe the reasons behind that. So
dead handhelds. We're going to get into it.
Love talking about dead handhelds. Mike, what you been playing?
Oh, well, you and I dove in to Halo Campaign Evolved.
Yes,
and
we did.
went right into those prequel missions. And I thought it would be fun for us to just talk about that this week.
Yeah.
Because that's like super fun. Also, I listened to another podcast that talked about Halo Campaign Evolved, and we were not the only ones that thought about Callus's Palace on the Leviathan raid when we played the prequel, because there's some really weird like crossover there in aesthetic design.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to say what the campaign's about. I'm going to keep it spoiler free, but it's really fun and I really enjoyed it. And it's really weird to play Halo with sprinting.
Yeah. And it was like maybe 2 hours long, right?
Yeah, maybe 2 hours for both prequels.
Yeah, so not super long. It's like 3 missions.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be the main course here. Like the remade campaign is the main course, but it was fun
for
to play
sure.
this.
We'll play that, I'm sure. But I really dug it, and it was really fun. And on top of that, it's just like it made me purchase a Game Pass subscription for a month again. Yeah, so I guess in that sense it worked for them. But I mean, will I just cancel that subscription at the end? Probably. But it was. Yeah. I mean, it was worth it to play that, and it's fun. I don't know how I feel about Halo Studios just remaking old Halos, though.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of tired of this whole leave us on a cliffhanger for the big sequel. And then, because they've done it twice now. They did it with Halo. Well, they did it with like Halo 5, which a lot of people say is the worst campaign. Just didn't really gel. Halo Infinite kind of left us on a cliffhanger and then walked away. And they were supposed to have these like single player DLC kit, like things that added to the story, and they just canceled all those.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of weird to me that Halo's in this weird frozen zone where they just keep remaking the old games and not making anything new.
Yeah, we see this happen with like sometimes with developers that are like given an old game treat. Like Halo Studios is just 343 reformed, but I think it's safe to say that probably a lot of people who made the previous like generation of Halo games are probably not still there. And Halo Studios is effectively a new studio. I think that's speculation on my part, but I feel pretty confident in it. So we see this sometimes, like we saw it with Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition in 2011, where that was 343's first Halo game, was remaking the first Halo game. And then they went on to make Halo 4 and Halo 5 and yada, yada, yada. We can just debate on whether they were successful or not. We see this with, there are some Nintendo games like this, like Link's Awakening remake for for Switch was made by Grezzo, which had remade Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask before this, I think. And then they did Link's Awakening. And then they got to make their own game, which was Echoes of Wisdom. I think that was also Grezzo.
Oh, I liked
Um,
Echoes of Wisdom. I thought that was fun.
yeah. Metroid Prime, or no, sorry, Metroid Dread was made by Mercury Steam or Mercury Stream. They'd done the remake of Metroid 2 on the 3DS. So it's like, go back and remake an old game so you understand why this game is good, and then make new games. And I think we're kind of seeing that again with Campaign Evolved. It's like, go back and remake Halo 1, understand why Halo 1 was good, and then we'll let you make Halo 7.
I hope so.
What I think is happening here.
I hope they figure out a way to fix all the stuff they've set up in the story, because it's like definitely lost the plot, it feels like. And I actually cared about the campaign and story when I played these games as a kid. So I have like kind of a nostalgic attachment to it. And I just hope they find a way to wrap it all together somehow, because that's the problem, or tell different stories, like not talk about Master Chief, which we were talking when we were playing the game about how it would be nice for them to make other Halo games from other studios that are not necessarily first person shooters, but like Halo Wars again, like bring that back really fun. Or something. Like give us more Halo pretty much, or something like ODST. Like that would be cool. ODST 2 would be sweet. I think that'd be really cool. So that's just my 2 cents, but I had a really good time playing that with you. That was fun.
Yeah, me too.
It was really fun.
Yeah. Is there anything else you've been playing this week?
Diablo 2. I'm still playing it. I played it some today. It's funny how I didn't really talk about this in the episode now, but this always happens where exploring the map is kind of frustrating at times, because what happens is if you don't find the waypoint and say you have to stop playing, it resets how that map is laid out. So a lot of it for me has been finding waypoints. That's what I've been doing. I'm just finding waypoints as best I can. So yeah, so I can navigate the map, but it's still good. What have you been playing?
Well, besides the Halo that we played, I'm almost done with my replay of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I am on the final boss. I gave it one try late last night, got about halfway through the health bar and died. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna try this again tomorrow with fresh eyes and fresh hands. So expecting to finish that maybe tonight. We'll see. We're going to watch Spider-Man tonight. So
I might go see the Odyssey tonight.
I'm interested in your thoughts on that. I saw that.
I saw Spider-Man on Thursday, so I'm interested in your thoughts on Spider-Man. We're just switching places.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
all we're doing.
Little movie thoughts. Yeah. So I'm excited to go watch Spider-Man tonight, and thank you for not spoiling any of it. And that's it. Is there anything else I've been playing? Oh, I did put another hour into Final Fantasy IX last night. So I have. This is not a problem. I'm going to say I almost said problem. It's not a problem. I have this thing right now where I have played enough Final Fantasy VII Remake with my SO in the room that now she's invested in the story. And so I feel like I can't play without her. And so yesterday, while she was at work, I was like, oh, I could play some Final Fantasy or I could finish Final Fantasy today. And then I was like, no, but Kelly really wants to see the ending. So I thought, what can I do instead? And so I started playing Final Fantasy IX, picked up my save file, Final Fantasy IX again, and made a little bit more progress, but I am kind of stuck on a boss there too. So I got to do a little bit of old school level grinding.
Turn on the podcast. Let's get this going. Watching YouTube. Let's do this.
Probably what's gonna happen. So I think other than that, that's about all that that's really all I've been playing.
Nice. Well, if you want to support our podcast, go to codexpodcast.net. It's got all our links on there. You can join our Discord, you can send us an email, see our Trello boards of shame. Other than that, also tell your friends about us. It helps a lot too. Just tell your friends about the podcast. Tell them it's good, preferably. But you can do whatever you want to do. It's your life. You know, Tyler and I are just here. So with that, though, do you want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah, I'll say bye to everybody. Goodbye, everybody.